Today I'm going to be showing you what might be a new take on these wooden pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. First, I painted each pumpkin with Waverly's chalk paint in the color plaster. I'm making a garland, so the number of pumpkins will depend on where or what you want to hang your garland on. I wanted to give these pumpkins some dimension. I drew out where exactly I wanted to do just that. Then I laid a sheet of paper on top and traced the shapes and cut them out. I took a cork sheet and traced the cutouts on top side because the backing is too slick and it just won't take pencil or ink markings. I cut the shapes using scissors and just cleaned up the edges as I went. I lined them up on the pumpkin, peeled the backing, and adhered them to the pumpkin. The adhesive on these sheets are pretty strong and there's no need for extra glue. I took the leaves from the stem and spray painted them with this gold metallic paint. To dress these up a little more, I added these raffia bows with hot glue to the top. To add a little something extra, I cut petals from a pine cone and hot glued them to the stems. To attach the jute string, I laid the string across the back. I cut a small strip of felt and hot glued it over the jute to secure it. Then I hot glued a leaf between each pumpkin. I still wasn't satisfied, so I added a piece of greenery beneath each bow. I hung the garland on a decorative ladder from the Dollar General, and I added extra leaves where I tied it on. To make this simple sign you saw on the ladder, I used acrylic paint and pumpkin to recover an old project made from a sign from the Dollar Tree. It took a couple of coats, but it covered it pretty good. I cut out vinyl letters using a Cricut and an image in Design Space and placed it on my sign. If you don't have a vinyl cutter, you can purchase stickers, you can use stencils, or you can print out your wording and use graphite paper to trace the letters and paint them on. Lots of options out there. For this project, I used a microfiber cloth from the Dollar Tree to make a stuffed pumpkin. I removed the label and the plastic tabs that hold it together and the tag. I laid it out and folded the length in half. Then I clipped the edges together. You can pin if you don't have clips. I took it over to my sewing machine and started with the back stitch and stitched down the clip side using about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. It doesn't have to be precise. I also back stitched when I got to the end. If you don't have a sewing machine, you can hand sew, and there's other options like fabric glue, fabric hot glue, and stitch witchery. Next is to turn right side out. I threaded an embroidery needle with some thread. Embroidery floss would have worked better, but I didn't have any white. So I just doubled up my thread by knotting the ends together. Starting on the open end, doesn't matter which, I did a basting stitch all around, leaving a long tail. When I got to the end, I pulled both strings tight to close up the opening, and then I tied a knot. I added some polyfill and sewed a few stitches to close the gap a little more. I finished stuffing the pumpkin and closed the second opening the same way. Next, I threaded some jute twine through a tapestry needle. I poked through the center, going in one end and out the other, leaving a tail. I go back in the same end, holding the tail in my hand so that it doesn't loosen as I tighten up the jute. I do this about 5 times and then knot the ends together and clipping away the extra. I work the strings to where I'm happy with it, not going for perfect because no pumpkins are. I used a wood piece I got from the Dollar Tree and hot glued it to the top for a stem. I hot glued a leaf from a floral stem from Hobby Lobby to the top and glued it down so that it would lay nicer and not just stick straight out. I added a piece of greenery and a gold leaf that I spray painted earlier. One final touch was to take a piece of jute with wire on the inside and wrap it around this thingy here. I cut it in half to make 2 and hot glued them to the top, and bam! This next one is easier. It requires 3 of Dollar Tree's orange pumpkins. I painted the first one with Waverly's chalk paint and celery. I painted the other 2 in Waverly's plaster. I leave one white, but the other I wanted orange. But to get the orange that I wanted, I mixed that pumpkin paint with white and then added yellow and a little more white. Then I painted the entire pumpkin. Once they were dry, I hot glued the wood pieces to the tops for stems and added greenery to each one as well. I had this crate for years and placed a tree skirt inside, draping it over. I finger knitted the skirt in another video. I'll put a link in the description box. I placed some leaf stems from Hobby Lobby in each corner. These fairy lights run on a timer, so I placed them inside and strung them throughout the leaves. I arranged the pumpkins inside how I wanted them and added 3 smaller velvet pumpkins from Hobby Lobby. I absolutely love this one. Most of us have seen or made the sweater pumpkins by now, and I wanted to show you how mine turned out. I painted the Dollar Tree pumpkin in Waverly's plaster, then I cut out a circle on the bottom. I stuck the pumpkin through the sleeve of a sweater and cut the sleeve, leaving enough to completely cover it. Starting at the top, I hot glued the sweater to the pumpkin. Then I glued the sweater to the opening in the bottom and put the piece I cut out back inside, added a little hot glue to keep it in place. Again, I attached the stem, greenery, and leaves to the top using hot glue. Last but not least, I removed the stems from Dollar Tree's mini pumpkin. I stuck a toothpick in each one and painted them all a different color and sticking them into a pool noodle to dry. Then I painted the stems with Waverly's hazelnut. Once the pumpkins were dry, I added a little antiquing wax and blended it out with a baby wipe. I stuck them on the bed of the truck. I have a link in the description for a video on how I painted and added a rust job to this truck. I glued in some raffia to fill the gaps, and that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye y'all.